Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your modelers have practically built themselves. Folks, it's Mad Dog Merv. Well, today's the first part of August, and August has, well, a lot of things going on, but particularly I wanted to cover today the event that happened on August 6th of 1945, and that was the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Now, we're not going to cover that necessarily, but we are going to cover something that has a Utah connection to it, and that is Wendover Army Air Base. And we're going to look at one of the models that I built for the museum out there that has to do with the dropping of the atomic bomb. So without further ado, let's head on out to Wendover. Let's take a look around and let's look at that B-29 model that I built, shall we? Wendover, Utah is right on the border with Nevada. And there's actually a Wendover, Nevada, but back in the day it was just Wendover, Utah. And it's significant because in the early part of World War II, an air base was built there because it's a very remote area, and they trained B-17 and B-24 bomber crews. But in 1944, they began to train B-29 crews for a special mission called Silver Plate, and this is the 509th Composite Group that you have heard so much about, that dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So you saw kind of an overall diorama of the base there. Here is a drawing of the original runways there, and that's changed a little bit from how it is today. 509th was given special B-29s that were specially designed and modified, and they came straight from the factory. So they had these factory fresh planes that they were able to practice with out here at Wendover. The airport today is used as the airport for the city of Wendover, the town of Wendover, and they actually can fly in up to like 737s. There are some companies that will bring in gamblers to the casinos, which is kind of a neat thing out there, help that economy. Here's a picture of a B-24 that came to one of the air shows that I was at, and to see a B-24 land on the strip again really gave me chills, because this was an area where B-24s and B-17 crews trained during World War II. And here I am as Major Disaster, standing with Diamond Lil on the tarmac there at Wendover. And this was kind of a neat experience to be able to do this. The air traffic control tower is still there. It's been restored, and they actually have actual air traffic control broadcast being broadcast outside the tower, which is fun. But the little building underneath the tower is where the museum is housed. It's kind of the operations center and museum all rolled into one. So it's kind of a neat little place to go and visit. This base was built in the early part of World War II to train bomber crews. Well, one of the ways to get out here, and this great picture from the Utah State Historical Society, you can see the Western Pacific Line that comes from Salt Lake City right out here through Wendover. And in the picture you could see some of the water towers. There were 3 water towers there in town, but here's one of them is still standing. What a neat relic. So here's a great overall picture of the base, and I believe this was taken from the water tank that I'll show you here in a minute, but the train station would be out of picture to the right, but you can see it's a pretty sprawling base. Now here's the power plant for the base. And while it's not in use today, the equipment is still inside this building. It's really kind of neat looking to look inside that building. And just off to the right is the water tank for the base that supplied the base. And this is probably where that overall picture was taken. So that's kind of a neat relic that's still there. But this, the gate shack at the very far northeast corner of the base, is still there. It's dilapidated more and more every year. That was the original gate. So here is the train station that the soldiers would get off. This is Wendover. Here you are, folks. You're in Wendover. And here's a great picture of a group of soldiers just getting off the train. They're at the tracks there in Wendover. When you go and visit these sites, it's kind of amazing to look at these pictures and actually look at the sites today. So Wendover was used as a training base. They trained crews together, and here they are doing some aerial gunnery training there at Wendover. I had an opportunity several years ago to go through many of the buildings at the base, and here is the enlisted men's mess. And the inside of the building is actually pretty decent shape. This was used by the Air Force Reserve for many, many years. And you can see, looking down at the rows of the different barracks, one of the shower buildings is off to the right here, because you didn't shower in your barracks, you just lived in your barracks. But they had a shower building at the end of each block. And here is one of the barracks that is still standing. Most of the barracks for the base are still there. Some of them are occupied by people. Some of them have squatters in them. This is one that we got a picture of the inside. This is what they look like today. Pretty, I know, pretty unfortunate, but there are groups that are working to restore a couple of these to their original World War II look. And here's what it looked like in World War II, which is pretty neat looking. So if you get a chance, there is one that's been restored. Go down and look at it today. This is the HQ building, and part of this still stands not far from the control tower here on the base. Like I said, a lot of the buildings, a lot of the original buildings are still there. And the Enola Gay hangar, as it's known, this was one of the very large hangars that B-29s were hangared into to work on. And I've been all through this building and probably do a video on that one of these days. This is the bomb site storage building. And what they would do is they would store the Norton bomb sites in these rooms, or in this building. And here is the safes where the bomb sites were stored, because again, these were very top secret. So they were in this building. You had to have special access to get in there. Went in there without authorization, you get shot. I mean, it was a very important thing. This was actually, now it's the fire department building. This is where they would train bombardiers. It has a very high roof for a reason. And this is where they would train the bombardiers for the crews. When I was told, there was kind of a gantry crane that you would sit in across the top. It would kind of row you across the top with your bomb site, and they would have these maps down on the floor. Kind of a neat concept. And well, here's the base pool, and what it looked like after the military left. It became the city pool for the city of Wendover, the town of Wendover. And nowadays, well, it's pretty dilapidated. Part of the buildings are still there, the pool itself is still there, but it's full of dirt and it is no longer used. So a little bit further out on the base is the bore site pit, where they would pull the aircraft up and they would sight in their guns on this big mound of dirt, basically. It's fun to be able to see one of those still intact. But just down the road from that is the bomb loading pit. This is a special bomb loading pit. There's one here and there's one in Tinian, on Tinian Island in the South Pacific. And what it was used for was loading these, what they called the pumpkins, but these shapes, these atomic bomb, shapes, for lack of a better term, onto the aircraft. And you can see this diorama here in the gift shop that shows how that pit was used, how they would put the bomb in, then they would pull the aircraft over, open the bomb bay doors, and lift it up into it. Also at the museum, there are a couple of other displays, and this one of a uniform. But you notice the B-17 on the top? It's a cutaway B-17. Well, that's one that I actually built for the museum. One of the artifacts, one of the things that they have is a 1-to-1 scale, perfectly built replica of a little boy atomic bomb. I love this picture here with Mark because I call it Fat Man and Little Boy. I know, terrible. But on this replica, they have had it signed by people like Paul Tibbets, who's the pilot of Enola Gay, and all sorts of other people associated with the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs. Well, speaking of models for the museum, they had asked me to do a series of B-29s in this larger scale for their museum. This particular one is a cutaway of the boxcar, which dropped the second atomic bomb, the Fat Man, on Nagasaki
on August 9th of 1945. And I chose to do a cutaway of it so you could kind of see all of the really cool things inside of it. Here we have kind of an overall look of the aircraft. Thing's about 3 feet wide. I mean, it's a big aircraft in 1/48 scale. And that's, I know why they wanted these in the museum, because they are very visually stunning. So here you can see on the far left side the pumpkin, as they called it, which was a shape of the actual atomic bomb, but it didn't have anything in it but concrete. But they would fill these up and take them over and drop them over the Salton Sea as practice bombings from Wendover to that area to practice for these missions. Back to the interior here in a minute, but I wanted to introduce you to the pilot, Chuck Sweeney. And when I do my persona, I do it based on Colonel Sweeney. He flew the second atomic mission as the pilot. And his co-pilot was a man named Don Alberry. And I got to meet Don a few years back at one of the, where they get all the veterans together. What are those called? Reunions. Thank you. In Wendover. And it was a great opportunity to meet him. I was in uniform. I got to tell you, it was such an honor to meet this man, the co-pilot, on that particular mission. Now, looking at the interior of the aircraft. So you're back to the interior. Again, you can see the pumpkin. And I decided to open up the back bomb bay as well and show the fuel cells that were back there for the long range, the extra fuel that they needed for this long range mission. And I wanted to model the aircraft as it was in flight with the gear up. So I needed a cradle to hold it so that the propellers and other things wouldn't get broken underneath. So I built this cradle out of evergreen styrene. And I put some felt there on the edges where it would touch the aircraft so it wouldn't scratch the paint. And here we are back to the compartment that has the flight engineer directly behind the co-pilot and the radio man, who is kind of behind the pilot himself there. And another shot of all of this this area, kind of an overall shot. So here's the propellers. Tried to do them in motion, make it look as good as I could in motion. And this is out there at Wendover. I'm not sure where it currently is because it's had some different areas that it's been. It's been in the museum and it's been in the little lounge of the airport out there. So thanks for joining us, folks.